Safe and responsible research data management serves as the basis for sharing datasets with the world. There are quite a large number of good examples of institutions that share research datasets openly. Within Europe, many of these datasets are harvested by the European Data Portal, a platform that promotes safe and responsible sharing of research data. I'm joined by Gianfranco Cecconi and Esther Huijer from Capgemini Invent team that lead the consortium running the European Data Portal. Welcome, Esther and Gianfranco. Thank you for joining us. So let's discuss the European Data Portal. As the name itself suggests, it's not a repository for open data, but it works as a portal. Could you explain how this is organized and what kind of influence you have on the management of open data?
The portal part of the EDP makes hundreds of thousands of datasets discoverable and searchable thanks to its metadata. On the EDP, we don't store the data. Our sources are the national and regional portals of the European countries. We collect and translate the metadata, thus enabling multi-language search. That means that a researcher from the Netherlands who is looking for information on chicken could type in kip and would find data on Hühner from Germany, on poulet from France, and pollo from Spain or Italy. Thus, the European Data Portal is the single access point for all of the data.
That sounds very interesting. Thank you so much. I am curious as well about the data sets themselves. The usefulness of open data is very dependent on the findability and the accessibility and interoperability and usability, like you said. So how is this fairness of the data sets stimulated by the European Data Portal?
Well, of course it is important that we try to make data fair in the way you define it across all the spectrum. So the findability, the discoverability, we like to call it, is possibly the only reason we were created for. So for about 4 years ago, there was a big need for making all of this data published by the countries, driven by the PSI directive from the Europe at the time, to make this data findable. And we also do that from a more technical perspective by promoting the DCAT application profile that makes catalogs easily findable and describing the metadata in a way that makes it also easy to integrate between themselves. The accessibility part, well, of course, we are about open data, we are about open protocols, and we don't require registration to access the data. So all of this in a way is covered. Perhaps the only component of accessibility that we are a bit weak on at the moment is the historical versioning of metadata. So at the moment, if one of the nations deletes one dataset, the metadata is gone as well. But stay tuned, because this is a feature we want to implement going forward. It's really on my list, just behind the desk there. The interoperability, oddly enough, the advanced interoperability features are beyond the skills of some of our audience, so we need to keep it simple. At the same time, we are pushing that direction. So, for example, today you can already query the metadata we distribute through SPARQL, so in a linked data fashion. So we are not yet there, but we're going in that direction. Finally, for reusability, because we are making other sources data findable, we don't have that much control, and we are also industry and sector agnostic. So we cannot put constraints, for example, vocabularies that are specific to a sector. However, licensing, because we are about open data, is incredibly important for us, and so we are pushing on that for the proper open data licenses to be chosen.
Yeah, right. So it sounds like you're doing a lot with helping people share their data in a general sense, but naturally there's also an enormous variety between data sets that are found on the European Data Portal. So how does the European Data Portal actively support people personally who publish and use these data sets?
We try to see that as a sort of support along all of the spectrum by which open data is collected on one side and published and creates an impact on the other. So imagine this kind of value chain going from one side to the other. So on one side, the collection, where the data publishers, the data providers, we like to call them, are usually the nation state in our case. We create training, we do generic support and actually tailored support. We go and visit them very often in their offices. We organize workshops. The subject we deal with may go from the classics to more edgy stuff, things that have become a concern for them. We ran recently workshop on a bit of everything from how to assess the impact of open data becoming available in your country to the more advanced technology features related to data portals, or we're going to talk about GDPR again soon because it's still a concern to some. What, for example, if personal data ends up in some of the metadata there? So what are the rights of the people describing the data? On the other side of the spectrum, the reusers is more about engaging the communities that are on that side of the spectrum. So we publish news, we engage on social media, we also offer training from that perspective. In a way, one of the biggest obstacles we are trying to deal with is trying to get everybody literate enough about data to understand what value is there, and that in turn incentivize reuse. I would say that we will be successful if we create an ecosystem around open data, and we help across all of the spectrum of users to do the best use and to be aware.
Right, so it does sound that this ecosystem is being developed quite thoroughly already. So finally, as a last question, I would like to know, you must also have examples where data sets that are found on the European Data Portal have been put to good use. So could you maybe share some of these use cases and success stories of the use of the EDP data with us?
I'd love to. Actually, showcasing innovative reuse examples is something we like to do to create awareness for the benefits. And I would actually like to challenge you and say that probably without you knowing, you already use some applications that actually are open data based. So maybe you are more aware of it now, and in your daily life will actually see some good examples. But to give some, we annually organize a hackathon together with the European Commission, where we award the most innovative approaches toward open data reuse. And I would like to give a few examples from the insight I got from these projects. We had this year 31 applications and the challenge to come up with a short list of 4 and announce a winner. So these projects were really innovative and inspiring. For example, one gave insight about the trade between European countries and where you could derive intelligence from. Another one cross-referenced data in the EU of funding in the concept of H2020 that goes into research and development, and compared it with data that venture capitals actually spend in their research and development initiatives. Another one that also made it into our shortlist was the idea to create a platform where you could get informed about your MEPs, score them, and actually see in which way they voted. But the project who actually was awarded for the first place is called Medicasio, and they built an environment where you could search for information that is usually found on the leaflets of medical products. They made it searchable and comparable in all official EU languages, and thus increased the transparency in that sector where there's still a gap in knowledge between the patient, the practitioners, and the industry. So I like to see how open data can be used to tackle environmental, political, financial, and ecological issues, and keep on looking for these use cases, promote them, and keep on working with them, having follow-up interviews to see how they're going in the future and what will be their next project, to keep on engaging with them and promote them in our communities.
Yes, that sounds like there's all kinds of wonderful things already happening with all the open data that can be found on the European Data Portal. So Esther and Gianfranco, thank you very much for joining us and showing us how the European Data Portal facilitates safe and responsible sharing of research data.
Thank you, and come and see us on europeandataportal.eu.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.